Good morning. Ooh, so excited. Okay, just give me a second to get situated. Okay. I'm so happy to be here. We have a beautiful sun. Y'all look amazing, and I just want to say thank you for coming and getting up early and hanging out with me this morning. If you're tired, you're not going to be after this because I'm going to try and infuse it with a lot of energy. So I'm excited to be here. I usually I'm either speaking in front of a group of college students or in like nightlife and party environments where there's music and there's chatter and I have to compete with that. So on that note, if you are hearing something that's resonating with you or you like it, you know, you can snap, you can clap, you can give it because we're all in here together, and this is going to be a presentation about a lot of validation. So I'm glad that was established earlier with the prompts that were being asked, and I love that. So I just heard something amazing. I didn't have it on my calendar. I should, but I can't believe that today's national holiday is National Day of Lesbian Visibility. So, yes, actually, you can cheer for that. Oh, I'm so excited about that. So I'm going to take a little video with everyone before we get started in the group. And we're going to show everybody how much we love lesbians, and we're all, okay, so on the count of 3, we're going to say, yay, lesbians, on the count of 3. Ready? 1, hold on, I'm going to make sure my timer's going. Wait, yeah, everybody get your phones out. I know you all want to get it. You want to get it too. Okay, ready? So on the count of 3, we're going to say, yay, lesbians. 1, 2, 3. Yay, lesbians! Yes! Oh my God, I'm so excited. So without further ado, we're going to talk a lot about lesbians. Actually, we're going to talk about a lot of different identities, but in all seriousness, and I will talk a bit more about my identity, that's through my lens, my framework as a queer woman, and we'll obviously be using that as a lot of reference points today. So I love this saying, gratitude is heaven itself. That was a phrase by William Blake, and that's how I want to get this presentation started. I'm so grateful to be here. I love Creative Mornings, and I have so much reverence for it. Thank you so much, Jen, wherever Jen is. I sent my slides at 1:30 this morning. So it was supposed to be Wednesday, so just to be real with you all about where I'm at. I know y'all are behind on a deadline. I know that you're tired. Like, we're all in this together. So thank you, Jen. I also have a lot of family and friends here. I can't even look at them because I'll start crying. So my family and friends who are here. And I'm giving that gratitude because I'm one person on stage, but there are so many people that inform and support and make it possible for me to do the work that I do. And we're never, a party of one. We always are influenced by other people. So these are my parents. And that's me as a little peanut, like a couple days in. So shout out to my parents, because when they see this video later and I didn't thank them, they'd be upset. So we'll start with them. I love you, Mom and Dad. A couple of my friends, not all of them. I went through thousands of photos, so if you're not there, you're somewhere either in spirit or another photo in here. But I want to give a shout out to some of my loves. My creative partner Elijah is here, who gave a Creative Mornings 2 years ago. We'll talk about reunion in a bit. My partners of yesteryear and today, Mal and Alexis. Mal, thanks for taking photos, has documented a lot of my life. And a bunch of other friends. So yes, love, chosen family. We'll talk about chosen family today. And I want to dedicate this performance, I can't believe it, the synergy of National Day of Lesbian Visibility to 2 of the women who have greatly influenced my leadership and my mission of partying with a purpose, which is Tracy Baim, who's here today, celebrating 35 years of LGBTQ advocacy and publishing this month. So talk about legacy, and Vernita Gray, who she wrote a book about. And Vernita is really a huge source of inspiration for me. We did lose her a few years ago, but she lived a legacy of almost 5 decades of, when we're talking about inclusion today, truly a practice of inclusion and partying with a purpose. She loved to party and have fun, but for many years advocated for people of color, for LGBTQ folk, for young people. And I really try and channel her in a lot of what I do. And I didn't get to know her super well, but legacy is important to me, and history and paying homage to the people who have come before us. so that we can move forward. So that's a tribute to them, and I really encourage you to look into their work and learn more about them. Vernita, after going to Woodstock, she went with a white gay man. She was a black lesbian, and she was like, I want to advocate for people of color and queer people. I'm a lesbian, I'm a black woman, I'm both. And that is intersectionality, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And then she was a part of the group that started the first Pride Parade in Chicago. We're celebrating 50 years, so we can give some snaps for 50 years of Pride, and we'll talk about that legacy in a little bit. So thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Vernita. Okay, so that's me. And that is, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm up here today. So this photo is from this summer. We were going to Pitchfork and wanted to rally the whole family together, and so my partner Alexis and I made this Queers Here sign as a way to actually find each other and gather for Shaka Khan and Lauryn Hill that day. We ended up breaking out into the electric slide with about 50 people at Pitchfork, and it was such a magical moment because it was just, you could just only see really like queer folk and people of color, and you're like at Pitchfork, which you know is not the people you usually think of when you're thinking of Pitchfork Music Festival. So just, I use that photo because a couple references. So this is Keith Haring dress. Keith Haring, Silence Equals Death, is a reference to the AIDS epidemic. And Queers Here, this is the pink triangle. So for anyone that doesn't know, you can look up those references, but that's why I have that there. So a couple things about my identity. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I think that's an important thing to acknowledge and get in the habit of talking about, not making assumptions about each other's identities. And I identify as a cultural producer, a party mom. And when I say party mom, it's because I work to nurture self and community celebration and growth. So that's a lot about what I'm going to talk about today. This sort of started, I guess the earliest origins of tracing this would be when I was in high school. I started a club at school called Word, working on respecting diversity. I know, but you know, that is honestly, I think, was my starting point. And I grew up in Vermont, so you're probably thinking like, wait, it's a very white state, and that's true. So if you can imagine, though, for the folks in school who were an other, creating a space for that. And I think that was really the origins of creating welcoming intersectional spaces for me, because of how we can connect based through our differences. And you know, finding a place for people to feel heard and seen, and that's what we're talking about with inclusion today. So, you know, about what I do, I'm sort of like the queen of doing the most right now, but I feel like I have a privilege to be able to do that, and so I have the tools and the ability to grind, and so that's why I do what I do. So the way I think of this is sort of like, that's me. I'm the rising guy, and every time I walk into a meeting or an event, I have all the people coming with me, and I'm trying to think about as many people as I can that don't have that seat at the table, and how do I advocate for those people at the table? So it's like, can you see us now? Can you hear us now? So starting with the can you hear us now, and then can you see us, and how we can do that through multiple touch points with our events, right? Yes, can you hear us now? Yeah, okay, so that's sort of what I imagine when I go into spaces. And you know, that is a process that is never perfect, and that's something I want to talk about today, that this is an imperfect process, and when we embrace that the practices of inclusion and equity and creating equitable worlds is aspirational, things get easier. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So just to touch base on that, and this is not going to be a DEI presentation, but I saw this, someone put this on their Instagram story, and I really loved it, and it's very simple. I don't want to get too caught up in semantics today, but this says, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a practice, equity is a goal. And I really like that, because diversity being a reflection of like, here we are and our multiple identities and intersections here together. As inclusion, as a practice that we're celebrating them, creating an environment of being welcoming and an acknowledgement and support. And then equity being a goal of how to continue to be mindful and practice undoing systemic inequity and inequality, to make sure we're creating more room at the table for people to have agency who haven't had agency. And I'm going to be talking about that today. But because the presentation is focused on inclusion and creating spaces that feel welcoming, that's going to be a big part of the focus. So This is from Sister Is, an Instagram account I just started following. I really love this. A business can be a prototype of the world you want to live in. And they also say, feminist entrepreneurship is not a thing you achieve, it's a thing you commit to. And so I really love that, and I love the positivity around that. And so when I'm thinking through work, it's through that framework of like, if we're going to be talking, for example, of advocating for women, that we are also advocating for women of color, queer women, trans women, and really being inclusive and having all those seats at the table. And we're probably never going to do that perfectly, but again, we are dropping that perfect idea and thinking about how we can continue to do better and stay open. So I love that. I think that's really fun. And I lost my next note. Let's see. Background music. Okay. So this is great. Forget the wall, build a deck, invite everyone over. I know, and I don't know why The funny thing is this is a deck, and my next point is if you have too many people over, the deck could collapse or you could fall off. So thank you for that. Overlake Avenue. You know, worse things have happened. I'm really actually glad that this is very flowy, so we didn't just do the full front till 8:30 in the morning. Okay, back on. Okay, let's leave that for the uncut version. Okay, so Milwaukee Lumber Company. Forget the wall, build a deck, invite everyone over. So I love this, and I also have an addendum to this. If you invite everybody over, the deck will collapse, right? So my addendum for this, and I'm not creative enough to make a meme, but would be, actually about the idea that as neighbors, and we have multiple decks, that we are being neighborly to each other. That I don't necessarily need to be on your deck. I don't need necessarily to be there to show my support for you, right? Sometimes a space isn't necessarily your space. And so this gets a little bit complicated, and it's a constant journey, but of our mindfulness around what kind of space we're taking up and how we can show support without, necessarily being there, right? So that's a good transition into talking about Reunion. So my creative partner Elijah's here. Hi. Reunion is our pro bono space that we've been running. We're into our 4th year. It's at Humboldt Park, and it's pro bono meaning we dedicate all of our time for free. That maybe will change soon. But we created this space to, have a welcoming environment for queer people, queer and trans folk, people of color, women and femme-identified people to make their work in an environment where they could breathe easy and see each other. So this started by us trying to find places to work and being like, we're not seeing ourselves anywhere that we are. And of course, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that in the room that, we have different needs with our different identities, and seeing ourselves reflected, especially when we're working every day, is really important. So we took over this space in Humboldt Park that was formerly Rational Park. Actually, it was all cis, white, straight men who were lovely, but we are essentially doing the opposite with what we're doing with Reunion. And it's really been incredible how we have evolved this space over time from being like, we just need this space to do our work. We tried the co-working thing and we're like, wow, that's a lot of work. Now we're 3 years later going full circle to just opening up the space twice a week. It's called Communion. Elijah just announced this yesterday. So if you want to come work with us in Humboldt Park at Reunion, we're going to do 11 to 5 community co-working hours, little community kiki on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Reunion is a project incubator that is on a sliding scale. So we want to make space accessible. Space, as I'm sure a lot of people know, is a really, that's often a first big barrier for artists and entrepreneurs to be able to get their work out there. So we wanted to remove that barrier by saying, we will work with you on a sliding scale, but you do need to have, we need to have an equitable exchange. If we are going to open up this space that has overhead, it doesn't just appear, it's not magically funded, then we need to have some sort of exchange. And so we work that out on sort of an individual basis, but we do prioritize those communities. And so when I was talking about the deck, that idea that yes, let's build a deck and invite everyone over, but that sometimes we need to have our own spaces, that it's okay, and that you don't need to feel left out if you weren't a part of that you can actually feel really excited about supporting in other kinds of ways. You can make financial investments. I mean, it's amazing now with Venmo and PayPal and all the ways you can just send some funds. I'm a big fan of that, investing in queer and POC economies. There's other ways that you can support. And you can ask, you can say, what can I do to help you and support you to keep doing this work? And so some of the things that we've done that's been really important at Reunion is creating space for people to gather and commune that's not bar and nightlife spaces. So even though I have worked in nightlife and parties for about 13 years professionally, it's so important that we have other environments for us to really be able to see each other and commune with one another for a whole variety of reasons. And so some of the things that we've done at Reunion have been like queer comedy, which we had last night with Tribble from Vocalo, and we do that fourth Thursdays every month. We have there's Tristan. We started Queer Care Day, which we will be bringing back in June. We have a Pride and Power series that we do there to, again, really empower and activate our community and commune and come together and heal and grow. So we have different vendors and giving agency to them, making sure that all of those vendors that are a part of that, A, are getting paid, and B, that they are a part of our community, right? So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later about equity, and this idea of impact over image, that when we do something like that, we call it a Queer Care Day, we need to have queer and trans people doing the facilitation and getting paid. So it's that kind of thing that's sort of working towards that, not just who you're putting in the photo, not just checking a box, right? That goes back to diversity of like, yes, okay, we've got this many people, right? But if those people don't have agency, then we haven't quite gotten to that point of equity. This is a photo from a yoga. We have residents here who have done wellness in the space. There's lots of markets and fairs. And I would encourage you guys to come check it out. We're going into our 4th year, and I got a little plug at the end, but it's Reunion Shy. We are 100% self-funded, meaning all of the community support from rentals is how Reunion has succeeded, which is remarkable. So now we're entering a phase in a few weeks where we will actually start asking for support from the community because we know that you want to support it. So that's a little bit about Reunion. Do we have any Slow-Mo fans in the house? Has anyone been to Slow-Mo? Hey! So Slow-Mo is Slow Jams for Queer Fam. This is a party I started 8 years ago. God, that's such a cute photo. I don't know if you guys can see it with how bright it is in here, but it's very sweet. That's from our 7-year anniversary. So Slow-Mo was a party that I started because as a queer woman, I wanted to go into an environment and be around, my people, and it'd be a little bit sexier and like not so turned up and club-like. I think a lot of people, but especially women, want to be able to like have a seat and have a conversation. And so I love music. A lot of my work revolves or is centered by music, especially nostalgic music from the 70s to today on R&B and funk. My dad was a concert promoter and a music critic, so I grew up with that, and Sade and Chaka Khan and all that. So that's why I started that party, and I found that really the nostalgia, the identities, the music set this tone for creating a sense of family. And this party is really so much more than just a party. It's really a family. A lot of people will say that they met their first friends there. A lot of people meet lovers there, and we all got to commune in this space together and figure it out. But it's really beautiful, and so we've expanded it again to try and move beyond nightlife for LGBTQ folk, because we need to exist and see ourselves take up space beyond just those environments. We're part of doing queer comedy, and we have done yoga and DJ workshops and concerts, and trying to do things that expand beyond and show that we can invest in and advocate for queer folk, especially queer women, and really put ourselves out there and say, like, this is up, we're taking up this space. So. And doing different things together. So during the very first Women's March at Reunion, we got several people together, about 30, 40 people came, and we made signs, and we got a car battery-powered speaker, and it took our intentional turn up to the streets, and we're part of the march, and when they sort of disbanded the march, ended up sort of leading it because of this bumping speaker, and brought people together again through music and advocating again for this idea of inclusion and intersectionality that, with a Women's March, all the women that we need to be advocating for. And I would just sort of expand that to say gender minorities in general, non-binary, genderqueer, and trans folk as well. Just a few other photos from slow-mo. Intergenerationality is extremely important to me. I think that we lose our identity, we contribute to the erasure when we are not doing our homework and we're not paying homage to who has come before us, right? Lesbian erasure is real right now, and there's a few different reasons why, that's a whole nother talk. But it is Lesbian Day of Visibility, so I feel like I can take up some space with this right now. This idea that like we have, a whole legacy that has come before us. So a lot of the things that I've been trying to do in the last few years has really been about, about paying homage. So a couple years ago, along with Liz Weck and Ruby Western, and in collaboration with Howard Brown Health, which is the Midwest's largest LGBTQ healthcare center, we did an exhibit called Lost and Found, an exploration of dyke spaces of the 70s and 80s. And Tracy, from her archives, she's like literally has the most archives of queer and trans history probably of anyone in Chicago, just let us into her basement to pull all this stuff out, as well as Gerber Hart Library, which is LGBTQ archives up in Rogers Park that I encourage you to check out and support. And so we did programming with that, with really trying to have a focus on intergenerationality, and it was extraordinary. People drove from other states to come to it. We had one event in particular, this is what it's from, a panel of women who created spaces in the 70s and 80s, age ranges 50s to their 80s. We had folks there from their 20s to their 80s in conversation. And I'm incredibly passionate about in-person community connection, because I think that's when we can break down walls and break down those barriers that sometimes our digital world we've rapidly entered can create. I think we need in-person experiences more than ever to soften, to be open, and to learn. And so that's why I call this Partying with a Purpose, because there's so much more than just a party. It's an opportunity to use an environment and a platform to create more equitable and welcoming worlds. So with this, we did a queer family photo shoot so people could get their family photos taken, whether it's your chosen family or your biological family. In this case, our friend Chris and his mom Charlotte are in that photo. This is Dee. She is in that photo that is up there. This is from Tracy's archives, and a few other events that we had. And I'm just excited that, I'm gonna go back. Wait, what's, you guys got a preview. Okay. But again, talking about creating spaces for joy and learning. So we have a DJ workshop here. We did like these dance, this classes with Darling Shear. There's Jared. At the Logan Square Arts Festival, we learned how to do like the dance to Rihanna's work, and just doing things together that are fun, that still give you that feeling of celebration that you get in a bar or club, but not necessarily having to depend on all those things that can get in the way. This is from Old Gold, which is our new party at the Ace for Sundays. It starts at 3, it's 3 to 9, so it's next Sunday. I would love for you to attend. It's all vinyl, and again, another opportunity for us to book women who are DJs. We don't book all women, but try to prioritize that. And the reason when I book DJs, I prioritize booking women, trans, non-binary DJs, particularly women, trans, non-binary, queer DJs of color, to, again, create more equity in the DJ world, and then also same with performances, because of how where those jobs usually go. And so we have a platform and an ability to do that. The great thing about Old Gold is it does bring out people that are older, that maybe have families, because it's 3 to 9 on a Sunday. So these are some of the experiments in trying to create, again, going back to inclusion, more welcoming spaces, and spaces that are solving a problem. That's a framework that I try to work from, which is, how can this solve a problem? If someone's doing this already, and could you support their work instead? Or is there a need that you're fulfilling? So this is the Reader. Tracy is now the publisher of the Chicago Reader, and Tracy has, after 30-something years at Windy City Media, she founded, which is our LGBTQ media company here in Chicago, was recruited to come when the Reader was purchased and became independently owned again, to come on as publisher, and she called me. I worked at the Reader for many years in a different transition about a decade ago as director of marketing, and then I left to start my company, No Small Plans, and she called me and she was like, would you come back? And I was like, absolutely not. And then here we are a few months later. So I came back to the Reader as director of public engagement and programs. That's a true testament to Tracy, who is really has been a mentor and inspiration for me. I believe wholeheartedly in her. And I want to talk about the Reader for just a moment because it's a really exciting time. It works very, very much in part into this conversation around inclusion, is that this is a weekly alternative newspaper that is thriving as we're seeing media and newsprint shutter and close. It's a struggle, and so we are being more vulnerable and open by saying we want you to support us. We need to do this together and breaking down that wall between media and audiences that I think print in particular has really struggled with. And so the Reader became an L3C, which means it's sort of a hybrid between an LLC and a 501c3. It's prioritizing community impact over profits. And so we have the ability to apply for grants. And we're really looking through a lens of, again, with inclusion and advocacy of Chicago. So it's a really awesome opportunity. I'm really thrilled to be back. I couldn't be more proud of the team that we have there. We have a lot of leadership, diversity in our leadership. We have an all-women board. We have a lot of queer women in leadership, POC people in leadership, and again, a really good change. The Reader has been such an important part of Chicago for almost 50 years, but how do we adapt and make sure that we are being more inclusive, having the stories that we're writing about connect to those actual communities, spending time there. So we just launched a membership campaign. I am gonna plug that because it only has a few days left. And we are developing this membership program. It's not a paywall, but as a way to, again, build connections between our staff, what we're doing, our content, and connecting with community. As Chicagoans, what do they want to see? What do they want to be a part of? And it's a way for Chicagoans to be able to invest in independent, community-driven journalism, which is really important right now, especially with the fake news that is out there, especially with the threat of journalists and journalism. It's so important that we have independent, intelligent, community-driven journalism. So we have a couple issues in the back. Yeah, yes, thank you for supporting that. So you can donate, it's at $48 at chicagoreader.com/backer, and then you get to party with me because I'm doing all the parties and programs like Jamila Wood's listening party in 2 weeks. Well, if you want to go, you have to become a member. I'm serious. We're gonna do like 20 seats for that one. She and I went venue scouting this week for that. It's gonna be really cool. And we just, I love her. So those are the sorts of things we'll do, and as members that you'll have first access to as being a part of our community and figuring out like, what do you guys want? So that's what's coming up for the Reader. And so that's chicagoreader.com/backer. Talk to me if you want to, afterwards, if you want to collaborate with anything with the Reader. We're really trying to be more expansive and open and inclusive. So how are we doing? Oh, we got plenty of time. Okay, so impact over image. This is something that that I talk about a lot. I feel really passionate about this because I think what's happening is we're in this like the age of diversity, and diversity is sort of become ubiquitous. We're like, okay, if we show that there's just this mix of people, like, check, we've done it, and like in fact, I think that can sometimes almost cause more harm because it creates this feeling of like, we've done it. But again, if you don't have those people with marginalized identities having agency, then you've actually exploited them. That's like the real tea, right? You have. So unless you're actually putting and investing back in them and giving them agency and seat at the table, it's just good feelings. So that's something that I've been thinking a lot lately with coming up on our 50th anniversary of Stonewall. I'll get those calls and I'm like, and it'll be like right before June, and I'm like, You could have called it a few months ago and know that you just realized it's Pride Month. But I say that because this is a good example of what happens when the check boxes happen. So, for example, if you're doing with your company a Pride event, and you're like, okay, we're gonna get all these Pride t-shirts, and we're gonna do the Pride float, that is good for morale. It does accomplish that. I don't want to knock that down. I think that that can feel really good and make the LGBTQ employees feel seen. And I think that investing in LGBTQ artists, entrepreneurs, vendors, concepts, education has to come along with that and is really more important. So if you are a company or you're a person that wants to do that advocacy this time of year, that's wonderful. Think about local organizations you can support. I think sometimes automatically people will think like, okay, HRC or Center on Halstead, because those are the reference points they have, and those are really important organizations. But there are LGBTQ organizations here in Chicago that are doing on-the-ground work, and they're not just on the north side, they're on the south side too. So a couple I want to mention, Reunion is actually one of them, Brave Space Alliance, Project Fierce, Affinity Community Services, which has served Black LGBTQ folk for several decades. There's other ways in other communities that you can support. And I'm not trying to knock like the t-shirts or the fun things. Like, we want fun, and yes, like Pride is fun and queers are fun, but really making an impact is what's important. So, lifting up narratives of queer history. This is 50 years of Stonewall. How can we talk about where we came from? What even is Stonewall? Where did that start? Who's doing the advocacy and creating spaces of inclusion in the city? So, being that we're like just creeping up to Pride, and because I work through this lens, and that's most of the experience I have is advocating for LGBTQ folk, that's why I give that example. But I think this is something that happens though, where there's this checkbox thing happening where we think that we've got it because of the image that we're projecting. But like going back and saying, okay, who's getting paid, right? Who are we seeing, but are they getting paid? And do they have agency? And have you thought about what they need? Because needs look different for different types of folks. So I love this, found this at about midnight. Oh, you can't afford to pay the artists involved with your project? Tell me exactly how you pay your bills with great exposure. How many people can relate to this one in the room? Right. So exposure and equitable trade are two different things. Sometimes we can't pay people, right? Like this, and I don't mean this as any shade. This is a huge honor to be a part of CM. But this is a donated, pro bono speaker series. This has value though, and I'll talk about the tangible values. There's a video that's coming out of it. Great photos are coming out of it. Exposure also has become a ubiquitous term, but I know based on the reputation of Creative Mornings that there's a whole process and the whole thinking behind making sure there's a facilitation of connections that lead to more work, right? So those, you just have to sort of evaluate for yourself, where am I willing and when would I be willing to do something like that? So you don't get to a point as an artist or an entrepreneur where you're like, everyone just asked me to do everything for free. And it's like, did you have boundaries set up though? So we have to do, no, and it's hard, and we have to do that work ourselves. But you gotta push back. I mean, Elijah and I had someone who wanted to rent the space the other day, and they're like, we have $150. And I was like, okay. But we have our bare minimum, like try to really keep things at $350. And next text, I can do $350. I'm like, oh, now you found the $350, huh? So, but I say that as an example. It's like, you gotta ask, and so we have to be our best advocates, right? So sometimes, as artists and entrepreneurs, that's part of our job. We have to keep doing that, and we need to do that for each other, and hopefully we'll work toward a world where there is constant advocacy for artists and entrepreneurs, and we just have to keep flexing that muscle and getting more comfortable talking about it. But again, going back to that idea of exposure versus trade, there are equitable exchanges. There are ways that we can be mindful about this. We like to do that with there's things you can do like, can you give someone a ride home? Is there like a travel stipend? Can you make sure there's like a meal or a drink? At least some of those things that show that you're thinking about the fact that that it's important that you're thinking in that kind of way and that you're thinking about their experience. So a couple questions I put up here about building equitable, inclusive spaces. Like we talked about this. Who's at the decision-making table? Like who's benefiting from it truly? How are you reaching the people, right? Because if you aren't a person that occupies those spaces or doesn't have those identities, how are you going to be able to reach those people? And maybe you're not the one doing it. Maybe you need to hire someone to do that. So next week, I'm going to be a part of a sort of conscious cocktail conference called Drink Chicago Style. And they hired a group of women to do some of this work to make sure they were really being intentional with their programming. And they paid them and hired them to do this consulting, knowing that because of the lack of diversity in certain ways on their team, that they needed to bring people in, right? So it's okay. It's okay to do that and say, hey, I don't have the experience or agency here, and then have the opportunity to bring someone in to support. So, for example, in that top left corner, that's a photo from a few weeks ago at Smart Bar with Slow-Mo. They do a series called Daphne, and they book all women and non-binary DJs, which is great. And so we brought in a DJ from another queer women-centered party in Oakland, and that was an opportunity to advocate for some other queer women DJs in Chicago. So again, who's getting paid, who's on the lineup, and thinking of it from that point of view. On the bottom left is a photo from the Coven Classic, which is a concert that I put on for Slow-Mo, which was all like sexy, spooky music, and we had a full band, and it was all women and non-binary musicians, and just having that was just so powerful because it was sort of this like witchy theme, and thinking about harnessing our power as women and femme and non-binary and trans folk, to see that reflected on stage and who's getting paid to entertain, right? And so there's a few other photos. Madame Gandhi from Pitchfork. So we had a Pitchfork weekend festival. Slow-Mo did party on the rooftop of the Ace, and again, opportunity to say, okay, who is on that lineup at Pitchfork that we can give some exposure and advocacy to? Another project I did last summer was called Queer the Pier, and that's something that I wanted to talk about for a minute because Navy Pier hired me to produce a queer program down at the pier. And I know some of you are probably thinking like, Kristen, you did a Navy Pier thing? I was like, yes, I was very excited to do a Navy Pier project because one, Navy Pier is free. It actually sees a very, very diverse audience, and I think that opportunity to engage folks that especially come from across the Midwest was a wonderful opportunity. It was an opportunity to have a family-friendly environment, and it was an opportunity to educate. So I was really excited by that platform and felt that it was extremely important that we referenced and chronicled and uplifted LGBTQ history. So part of that, the whole theme of that program was a sonic and visual journey through queer club culture. And so it was the two main parts were a concert and a fashion show. And so the concert was chronicling queer club anthems, and Adam Ness, who's in the top corner, we put a band together and a bunch of guest vocalists came, majority queer or queer advocates and allies, to perform songs from Diana Ross all the way to Robin. And then we partnered with Coco Rococo and Darling Shear, and we put on a queer club fashion show. And we chronicled through this fashion show some really important pillars of queer club aesthetic and culture: disco, Vogue, leather, and Club Kid. And so these are some of the photos from that. And we had almost 60 LGBTQ artists and vendors paid for that event, which made it the largest event of featuring Chicago LGBTQ artists. And so Navy Pier did that, right? And that was an opportunity for me being hired to make sure that we were doing that advocacy. And it wasn't perfect, nothing's perfect. I mean, we had protesters at this, and I had to get out on the mic and talk to the people while the protesters were trying to block the entrance. And you know what was really amazing is everyone from the pier and people who weren't even necessarily coming for Queer the Pier, the event, were cheering and really excited to see the advocacy. So you might be surprised sometimes the environments when you give people the opportunity to support what can happen. So going back to like impact over image, I found this, I love this account, Rinny Riot. She does these like vintage posters with these really like snappy statements. And she said, impact matters more than intention. So it kind of is similar to that impact over image. But this idea that, I think sometimes we'll be like, if we mess up, we said something that may have been offensive or someone found offensive or hurtful, and we're like, but I didn't mean that, right? It's really hard to get out of that pattern of going back to that knee-jerk feeling of like, but that's not what I meant. I just want to encourage you to get into a practice, and it's a lifelong practice, of being like, just dropping the defensiveness. If you drop that, you might even be able to go back to that and talk about that, intention. But when you've impacted someone, it's like if I bump into someone, right? I mean, maybe I didn't mean to. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt them, right? It's the same sort of thing. So impact mattering more than intention. If someone who has an identity that you don't hold, and they have shared something with you about how it's hurted or offended them, just being open to hearing about it, I mean, that's a gift, right? I think sometimes we think about privilege and we're like, ooh, privilege, and like it's uncomfortable to talk about, and I need to like get really feeling like guilty and caught up in that. Actually, you're just then again centering yourself. If you stop and you're like, okay, all right, I'm really open to this. Thank you so much. Thank you for the gift of feedback. And so I really want to encourage that. I'm reading a book called Pleasure Activism right now by Adrienne Marie Brown. Anyone else reading that? She's in town next week for anyone who's really likes her work. But this idea of being an advocate, that making it pleasurable. Because I think we're in this time right now where we're like fighting so much on the internet and we're fighting for space. That's a scarcity mentality. An abundance mentality is like, wow, I have all this opportunity to learn. I have all this time to do better and to grow. And I think when we come from that mindset, we can really get the work done. So dropping the defensiveness and being able to be like, okay, you know what? I'm here to hear you. And sometimes people don't want to talk about it. Sometimes they don't want to hear from you. And you need to just be like, okay, don't take it so personally. So dropping defensiveness, dropping taking things personally, and just that creates pathways to empathy. And I'm sure you picked up on empathy is really important to me. So talking about the impact over intention, another company, big brand, Nike, that I was hired by last year, another opportunity I had to say, okay, this is great. I'm glad you want to do this Pride run. That's what they hired me for. How can we, again, make sure that we are really going back to the roots of Pride and the history of why we honor and celebrate this time? And how do we make that historical and pull that in? And then again, how do we use this Nike money to be able to, right, pay and invest in LGBTQ folk? So we did, on the run, we did an homage to the gay games, which Tracy was very involved in. That was it 2006? 2006, which is like the gay Olympics, and it was here, and it's a really big deal. And so we set up our own, like, kind of the gay Olympics, and to bring that history in. And then I made a playlist, again, that was like that chronicling of music that has been really important and iconic in LGBTQ communities through the decades. And then this is Mother Nature. I love them. They're an amazing hip-hop black queer duo here from Chicago. They're phenomenal. I booked them 4 times last year. I was like, I had to stop, and just like clear favoritism happening. But they're amazing, and they performed in Nike and really just like lit up the store. And then the facilitators of the event were members of the LGBTQ health and fitness community, and then the people who did the food and drink as well. And again, this is Nike, right? I mean, this is going to them and saying, it's great that you want to do this Pride event and this run and bring folks together, and we love that. But we need to make sure that when we're Nike, that we are also investing back in that community. This is from the MCA, so I did, with No Small Plans, 2 big parties with the MCA. One was Prime Time, which is their museum-wide party. And they were always bringing in artists from outside of Chicago. And I'm a big fan of Chicago and keeping money here in Chicago. So, yes, a big fan. Like, I think it's the second city mentality of like, we have to bring someone in because it'll be a draw. No, Chicago goes hard for Chicago. So we booked an entirely all-women lineup, all-women artist lineup for that. It was co-headlined by Jamila Woods and No Name. And it was really wonderful because No Name had yet to actually put on a show to the public, and I had like fancy footwork convince her to get out of another gig to get and do this one instead, which ended up working out really well because then she really had grown quite a lot in her popularity and did 2 days at the Metro. So you just never know what's going to happen when you advocate for, oh my gosh, I fell on the stage one more time, when you advocate for artists. So that was something that we did, and then we worked on that together, and it was a few days after the election. So having this lineup of all women was like, we needed that power, and the theme was Ascend, and it was incredibly powerful. It sold out super quickly, proving the point that we don't have to bring in artists from outside of Chicago. We don't have to have like these like all white dude bands either, just saying. There's a lot of diversity and talent in Chicago. So then after that, we collaborated again on the museum's 50th anniversary. And again, that chronicling of history and making sure that maybe we didn't do such a good job being advocates in the past, but now we have an opportunity to really be advocates. So with that whole program of what we did all weekend was pulling from communities that have been doing work as Chicago artists in the past till now, current work in this new millennium, and all the way back to when they started 50 years ago, and giving them that agency. So there's a few people on the stage. That's Lupe Fiasco up in the corner. This is the South Shore Drill team. And I really loved this particular part of the program where we brought together 3 different generations of artists that have influenced each other. So Jamila again, I love her. So Jamila, Avery Young, and Tasha. So Jamila chose Avery as an artist that has influenced her in Chicago, and then she has been a mentor to Tasha. So it's this amazing intergenerational conversation on stage. Again, and then that's Lacanthia performing up there in the top corner. I didn't know that was my next slide. We support you, we support you, we support you. So this idea that like we can be excited about sharing our support and our advocacy, we can be open in how we approach that and be mindful, but know that we're not always going to be perfect in how we accomplish some of these goals, but we can really do our very best. So I really like this. This is from Sublime JPEG, an Instagram account. Who cares? Do better, move on. Of course we care, right? So that first part's like, we care very deeply. But the idea of going back again to how we continue to build more inclusive and welcoming worlds is like, if you do mess up, or you've hurt someone, or you've done something, that you take that time to understand how you could possibly repair it, but also that we're moving on, right? That we're not getting so caught up in the fact that we made a mistake, but what we can do to repair it and move on from that. And I know that sounds kind of complicated, like, okay, wait, so I'm supposed to be like being apologetic and acknowledging if I've made a mistake, but then you're also telling me to move on. What I'm saying is that we are in a culture of a lot of conflict right now. And so embracing that's where we're at, but how can we together through our various, identities and experiences be brave in trying to, move forward in conversations? How are we going to move forward and not just get stuck? And I think we're in this era right now of that like icky, uncomfortable, stuck time, but that's just where we're at. So I really love this quote by a Buddhist philosopher, Pema Chodron. She says, start with where you are. And I love that idea. So we're all here today, and we can even start some of these things or redirect today in this space together, and that's awesome. Maybe there's something like new that you take away from this, and you start right from where you are. Because, this is complicated. It's hard when we're talking about inclusion, and we're like, wait, you told me to build the deck and invite everyone over. Now are you telling me not everyone's welcome? Going back to that idea that when we're creating space and we're centering space, sometimes that's language that's used. If I say, for example, Elijah and I's studio reunion, that we center and celebrate LGBTQ folk, people of color, women and femmes. When we're saying that, it doesn't mean you're not allowed here. It just means in this space, the people who have agency, those are the people who have agency. If we get to a point in our world where there is so much equity, that there is always advocacy of people of so many different marginalized or previously marginalized identities, then we wouldn't need those spaces, but we do need them. And then to add to that, I didn't even talk about just so many other identities that are not thought of and are not accounted for and don't have seats at the table. Of course, a really big one being people of various abilities or disabilities. That's something that was a really big learning curve for me. So I'll have a couple more minutes. I'll share a story with you of where I've been like, wow, I really learned something from that. I hurt someone and they shared something with me and it helped my work. So remember that when someone gives you feedback, as I said before, it's a gift. It can make you stronger. If you get too caught up in your ego, you're gonna miss the whole opportunity. Even if you and that person don't have this like kumbaya, happy, like we're best friends now at the end, because honestly, probably to be effective, you wouldn't. But that you can take something from that. So I had done a party and it was in a space that was not wheelchair accessible. And it was and I try to produce events predominantly in spaces that are, but this was a really good lesson for me in when we talk about wheelchair accessibility, or accessibility in general. And I put that in quotes because it's not a catch-all, right? So this has really impacted the way in event invites and in conversation I talk about that and being really literal. And I'm giving you this example because I want you to be able to take that away for people who do make spaces. So this person was sharing to me, in this example, there was a ramp that was being able to be used, but they had to access it at the beginning and end of the night. So it's really actually not very accessible because then you are limited to that. They can't leave when they want to leave. And there was some miscommunication around what that was. And they were really frustrated and disappointed. And they wrote me an email that was really hard to receive. But in that, I tried to pause and be like, you know what, this is a great opportunity for me to learn here. This is a person whose struggle is way more than mine. I have a lot more privilege, and I have the platform to activate and make some change based on this feedback they're giving me. Even if the way they're giving it to me is kind of loaded and it's a lot, that's okay, right? Because think about it, like I just fell off that stage and popped right back up, like things are fine. So I can handle that. And that's again going back to the beginning when I was saying like, I grind because I can. I have that ability to use, when I say party with a purpose, it's because I have this platform and I can use it. So in that moment, I was like, I can't believe she said all these things to me, because it was a lot. But then I thought about it and I was like, yeah, this has got to be frustrating. When she gets up in the morning and her train station in her neighborhood isn't wheelchair accessible. There's train stations that are being renovated right now with millions of dollars without elevators going into them, right? So, I'm using that as an example because then it really informed how I move forward with communication specifically about wheelchair accessibility in some other areas. For example, at Reunion, it is a wheelchair accessible space. We don't yet have hand grips in the bathroom. There are going to be people who use wheelchairs who can use that bathroom and who can't. So we don't say wheelchair accessible. Yeah, it's a few more sentences, but we will say exactly what it is. Slow-mo gets really crowded at the Whistler. I don't say wheelchair accessible just because this space is ADA compliant. I say that it is crowded, and if you would like to come and you need space designated, to get in touch with us so that we can accommodate that. So there's this like two-way communication and street going on how we can accomplish our goals and make spaces more welcoming and inclusive together. So I just wanted to share that because I wanted you to know, like, I'm making mistakes all the time. When you're on this pathway to inclusion, you're gonna make mistakes. And like, if you guys take anything away from today, I hope it's that you feel encouraged and excited. Knowing that we can't skip over the whole part of the work, but that, coming from a place of abundance and empowerment, when we talk about privilege and we think about the various aspects of privilege we have, what's the other meaning of privilege? It's honor. It's an honor to be able to advocate for people. It's an honor to be able to be like, yes, I'm gonna go hard for you. I'm gonna do what I can, and I'm gonna learn how to do that better and better over time. So I want to encourage everyone to just like think about that. I loved the prompts in the beginning. What's welcoming to me? How can I make a space more welcoming? And that it's a journey, and it's a journey that we can go on together. And I'm just so honored that I got to be able to, share some of these ideas and some of the things that I've worked through with you. I think for me, how I've been able to create spaces that a lot of folks have reflected have felt welcoming to them, to give some specific examples, is who are the people who are being represented. We talked about that, the imagery that you're sharing, the language. It is language like that of stating what's the accessibility information. What is the intent of this event? What kind of environment do you want to foster? What do you want people to get out of it? And coming from that place of openness rather than defensiveness, right? Like abundance rather than scarcity. So I think we can all do that, and we can get better and better as doing it all together. So I wanted to make sure that I left enough time for questions.
We don't have time, but...
Oh, I had 10 minutes on mine. Was it 10? No time for questions?
No, we're over time.
Oh, we're over time.
Yeah, but if you stick around after...
We'll say, I'm sorry, Jen. I was looking at the time. I thought we had, okay.
That's okay.
Well, we don't have time for questions, but we're going to wrap it right up and go to them. I'm sorry. I thought I was going based on the time on the clock. Watch what happens live. So this is, quick plug. So yes, I don't know, the No Small Plants Instagram is I just never use it. I can only manage 4, that's enough. Kristen Kaza, Slumber Party Reunion, Chicago Reader, and that's actually Chicago_Reader, that's a typo. And would love to talk to you afterwards. I'll be here. And I just want to leave on this note. This is one of my favorite poets. Speaking of National Day of Lesbian Visibility, June Jordan. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones. We can do it now. Don't wait. Do it. Yes? Can we all get a cheer? We're going to go out there and do it today. And thank you, Jen. I'm so sorry I messed up on that time. I will be here if anyone wants to chat and hang out.